Good evening again, Cubs. It's time for another story. This one reminds me of my school days as we were to perform this live in front of our class. I did get to narrate, and I did enjoy it, but that's the past, as are most good stories. I open my book and turn to page 69, beginning of the Cask of Amontillado. If you're ready. Good. I had put up with 1,000 injuries from Fortunato, but when he insulted me as well, I vowed revenge. I did not, however, utter the threat. In time I would be avenged, this was definite. I must not only punish him, but punish him in such a way that only the victim, Fortunato himself, would know. Neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued to smile in his face, and he did not understand that I was smiling in the thought of his death. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on the expert knowledge of wine. When it came to inspecting paintings or precious stones, Fortunato was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him. I was skillful at wines myself, and I bought fine wines whenever I could. I ran into my friend one evening at about dusk during the supreme madness of the carnival season, when the whole world is alive with party-goers and masqueraders. He hugged me with too much warmth, for he had been drinking much. He had a tight-fitting striped outfit, and on his head was a large cone-shaped bell cap of bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I'd never stop shaking his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, how remarkably well you are looking today. I've bought a huge cask that I suppose to be filled with Amontillado, but I have my doubts." "How?" he said. "A cask of Amontillado in the middle of carnival? Impossible!" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full price without consulting you on the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado!" he exclaimed. "I have my doubts," I said. "Amontillado!" And I must satisfy them. "Amontillado!" "You seem busy," I said. "I'll go see Lucrezia about this. If anyone has a critical mind, it is he. He will tell me." "Lucrezia cannot tell Amontillado from a sherry," scoffed Fortunato. "Yet some fools say that his taste is a match for your own," I told him. "Come, let us go," said Fortunato. "Where?" "To your wine vaults," he said. "My friend, no," I argued. "Some other time, perhaps. I will not impose upon your good nature. You obviously have other plans." "I have no other plans." "My friend, no. I can see that you have a severe cold as well. The vaults are terribly damp." "Let us go nonetheless," Fortunato insisted. "The cold is nothing. Amontillado! You have been cheated, I tell you. Such as Lucrezia, forget him. He knows nothing about wines." Thus speaking, Fortunato took my arm. I put on a mask of black silk and a cloak, and we hurried to my mansion. None of my servants were at home. All had left to make merry at the carnival. I lit 2 torches and gave one to Fortunato. I led him through several rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, asking him to cautiously as he followed. We came to the foot of the stairs and stood together upon the damp ground of the catacombs, an underground tomb of my ancestors, the Montresos. My friend's walk was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. I heard his lungs struggle with the damp air. "How long have you had that cough?" I asked Fortunato. My poor friend coughed so hard and long that he found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said. "We will go back. Your wealth is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, and beloved. You are happy as I once was. You are a man who would be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back, or else you will be ill. I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucrece." "Enough," he said. "The cough is mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "And true," I replied. "And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. However, you should still use all proper precaution. A drink of this other wine will defend us from this damp." Here I opened a bottle of wine that was stored nearby. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer, and then paused and nodded to me, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the dead who sleep around us." "And I drink to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." We had passed by long walls of piled skeletons and casks of wine, and we were deep inside the catacombs. I paused again. At this time Fortunato seized my arm. "The damp," I said. "It's making you worse. Come, we will go back before it's too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. First, though, another sip." I gave him more wine, which he downed at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. Then he laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesture that I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a bizarre one. "Do you not understand the signal I just gave?" he said. "No," I replied. "Then you are not a Freemason?" Yes, I said. "Yes, I am." "You? Impossible! A Mason? You belong to our secret society?" "I am a Mason," I replied. "Give me a sign to prove it," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my cloak a mason's trowel for applying cement. "You're making fun of me," he exclaimed, stepping back a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and once offering my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, walked down several flights of stairs, and arrived at a deep crypt, another tomb. The foulness of the air made our torches glow rather than flame. At the farthest end of the crypt there was yet another crypt that was less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human bones. 3 sides of the smaller crypt were decorated in this manner. The bones of the 4th side had been thrown down and lay scattered upon the earth, forming a mound of some size. On this 4th wall we saw still another crypt. It was about 4 feet deep and 3 feet wide, and 6 or 7 feet high. It was backed by a wall of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato lifted his dull torch and tried to see inside the crypt. "Proceed," I said. "Here in the Amontillado. As for Lucrece—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend as he stepped steadily toward. I followed immediately at his heels, quickly reached the end of the recess, and found his progress stopped by the granite wall. He stood there, stupidly bewildered. Before he knew it, I had chained him to the granite wall, and its surface were 2 rings about 2 feet apart. From one of these hung a short chain, from the other a padlock. I threw the links of the chain around his waist and locked them together. He was too surprised to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand along over the wall. You cannot help but feel the dampness, I said mockingly. Once more, let me beg you to return. No? Then I must leave you. But first, I must give you all the attention in my power. The Amontillado! Cried my friend, still not recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones already mentioned. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a mound of building stones and mortar. With these materials and the aid of the trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first layer of masonry when I discovered that Fortunato's drunkenness had mostly worn off. I heard a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was still then a long silence. I laid down the second layer, the third, then the fourth. Then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted several minutes, and I ceased my labor and sat down upon the bones so that I could listen to it with more satisfaction. When at last the clanking stopped, I went back to work. I finished the fifth, the sixth, and seventh layers without interruption. The wall was now nearly level with my chest. I paused again, holding the torch over the masonwork. I threw feeble rays of lights upon the figure within. Several loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. I reproached the wall in reply to his cries. I shrieked, too, making my screams louder and stronger than his. I did this, and his yelling finally stopped. It was now midnight, and my task was almost done. I had completed the 8th, 9th, and 10th layers. I had finished part of the 11th and the last. Only one stone was left to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in place. Then there came out from the niche a low laugh that made my hair stand on end. It was followed by a sad voice, which I had difficulty recognizing as that of my friend, the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha ha ha! Hee hee hee! A very good joke! Indeed, an excellent jest! We will have many a rich laugh about it later! Hee hee hee! Over our wine! Hee hee hee!" "The Amontillado," I said. "Hee hee hee! Hee hee hee! Yes, the Amontillado! But is it not getting late? Will not they be waiting us at the mansion? Lady Fortunato and the rest, let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." He understood my meaning, and his joking tone faded. "For the love of God, Montressa!" "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." I listened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient and called out, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust the torch through the remaining hole and let it fall within. There came a fourth, and returned only the jingling of bells from his cap. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so, I'm sure. I hurried to finish my labor. I forced the last stone into position, then plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I rebuilt the old pile of bones. For half a century since, no mortal has disturbed them. Rest in peace. I do have to admit, Amontillado is a pretty good wine. I'm more of a Pinot Grigio person myself. Maybe a Shiraz, but Amontillado is delectable. I can see what would drive a rich man mad. I'm kind of curious how much a case of it was back then. But I regress. Most of you cubs aren't old enough to enjoy wine in its fullest. But when you are, I might invite you to my basement. I'm sure there'll be a cask waiting. Just look for the wall and the pile of bones. Good night, my cubs. Sleep well. Have pleasant dreams.